joining. I'm super excited. I've got some amazing guests today on the LTT panel, all about architecting teams that exceed expectations. So I hope you're ready. I hope you've got your drink of choice, whether that's coffee, tea, probably nothing stronger than that at this time. I'm sure that you've had to work very early this morning, but I'm super excited and thrilled to be talking to you today. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes, but if you're going to get to know us a little bit more. But we'd like to get to know you a little bit. So if you could put into the chat who you are, what organization you work with, and if there's a particular question that you're interested in hearing the panelists talk about or ask them, then please add it into the chat. You don't have to. You can think about it and ponder as they talk to you, but it would be great, firstly, to say hello, and secondly, to tell us who you are and what organization you work with. So as you join, that would be great. Hey, Richard, are you okay?
Good, thank you. Yeah. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. And Jan, you good?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me too.
Brilliant. And congratulations on your new
Thank
role.
you.
Day three in.
Day 3.
I love it. I love it. Hi, Brad. You doing well?
Well, I'm very well, thanks. Good morning, everybody. Good to be here.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Hi, Leslie. An HRD at Banner. Oh, brilliant. You're rebuilding after years of restructure. I need to get back to high performance culture. Very interested to hear your insights. Well, you're in for a treat, Leslie. I have to say, I have got the best 3 people on the planet to talk about this, and I'm buttering them up, as you can see.
I can hear already. Yeah,
I know.
Set expectations.
Well, look, you got to set the bar high. This is all about high performance, right? At the end of the day,
shoot for the moon and land on the stars, or something like that, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, we've worked in some interesting places together, Richard. So, at the end of the day, we kind of all know about that. So that would be really cool.
Well, we might even get to that a little bit later on.
We might do. I better not spoil I better not spoil it. Brilliant.
Steal my thunder.
Exactly. I'm getting too excited. Heather. Hi, Heather. I'm with lots of different organizations still pondering. That's absolutely fine. I just threw it in there because we were having a conversation offline before we came on stage, and we were really interested in what people were, what their challenges were. So I just thought I'd drop that into the conversation. But please don't worry. You've got lots of time to think about questions as we go. So we're going to get going because I think you don't really want to hear from me. You want to hear from these lovely people. So let's kick off. So hi, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Jo. I'm MD and founder of Let's Talk Talent. And I'm going to be your, I suppose, compere or facilitator today, keeping these guys to time, but also trying not to clip their wings too much as they get excited about talking to you about architecting teams that exceed expectations. So for those of you that don't know about Let's Talk Talent, we are 10 years old, and our mission and purpose is to help you get, keep, and grow brilliant people. And at the end of the day, what could be better when you're thinking about teams, about how you get, keep, and grow them? So it really is part of our DNA. So we're thrilled to be able to host this today and know you're going to get huge amounts out of it. But why have I assembled these brilliant people? Well, I've worked with all of them. I've been a client of Jan's. Brad does some work for me as an associate, and Richard and I go back to our talk days, and they have a really interesting insight. All of them come from different backgrounds, experiences, and they have a wealth of knowledge that you can't just focus on one particular area. So I really wanted to bring a powerhouse together today of both in-house, out-house, and also different experiences of industries to you today. So Richard and I work together at Talk. He's now Chief Executive, Towers at Wireless Infrastructure Group. I'll let him explain what the hell that is as he tells you. But it has a really interesting background. And again, I'm not going to spoil or steal his thunder. Jan and I worked together when she was head of talent and learning at Schroders, but now hot off the press, she's head of group talent and development at Admiral Group, and she's only 3 days in. So I'm sure she won't be sharing any secrets, but she's got a wealth of experience from a talent and development perspective, but also been through a huge amount of change in her roles. So I think she can bring a fantastic lens. And Brad and I met, I think it was about 9 months ago, wasn't it, Brad? And Brad is doing some really interesting things through his consultancy, and also a founder of a new AI business, and is going to be telling us how AI and teams are going, the effect of AI and teams. So I really wanted to bring in that sort of technology, but also Brad's experience is change and transformation. So I think he can bring a fantastic, interesting and smart practical lens to us. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So the 3 lenses that we're going to look at, and we're going to go to each panelist in turn, and they're going to give you, a set of application, their view on the 3 on their particular lens that I've asked them to talk about. So when we think about high performing teams, we've all read, I'm sure you've read Google's paper called Project Aristotle, which talks about the principles of high performing teams, trust, psychological safety, ways of working, purpose. But I didn't want to look at it from that science perspective. I really want to look at it from I suppose, the art and the humanity, because people are the lifeblood at the end of the day. You can have all the science and psychometrics in the world that give you the data, but what does it mean as an individual? What does it mean as an individual leader? What's your role and responsibility in driving high performance and leading teams? What's the team's responsibility? How does that ecosystem? What do we mean by team in this ever-changing world of work? And then when you layer that up, what does that feel like from an ecosystem, from a organizational lens? How does the sum of the parts all come together? And that's what we're going to be exploring in the next 40 minutes. So enough about what we're going to talk about, and let's just dive straight in, shall we? So Jan, I'm going to come to you. And I'm going to ask you this question, and you said this, you said to me, high performance is a team sport and leaders are the coaches, not the stars. What did you mean, and how can you bring this to life for us?
Yeah, thanks so much, and I'm really delighted to be on this panel today. I think for me, and it can sometimes be forgotten, but to lead really well means to create teams that don't just deliver, but they feel energized, they feel connected to what they're doing, they get a real sense of purpose and achievement, and dare I say joy. Like, if people enjoy what they do, they are more likely to do it well and do it even and better. And I think as a leader, your job is to create the stage for people to perform on. So that's everything from creating the rhythms of the team, the psychological safety in the team, how we challenge each other, how conflict plays out, how feedback is a constant part of our way of working. And that allows then everyone to do their best work. And I think I've sort of, that's been my kind of premise in leading all the teams I've been, but also when I coach leaders across businesses, often when I come to them and they present challenges, it's often one of those ingredients is missing. And often I think, particularly in recent months where things have got really challenging, potentially cost pressures, restructures, people forget about that stuff. It's almost like that sort of, too fluffy, like that's like nice to have stuff. But for me, it's not nice to have. It is the core part of how successful teams work. And, and it comes from all of Lencioni's work, all of Amy Edmondson's work, all of the Google project. It does come from a, rigorous place, but it can too easily be forgotten. And so, as a leader or a coach of leaders, I always take people back to those elements.
Amazing. And where have you seen that really work? Is there an example that you can share, or vice versa, perhaps something that hasn't worked and you thought you had to really solve what was going wrong?
Yeah, it's hard to think of a specific example because obviously I don't want to sort of talk about specific individuals or teams, but certainly my experience, particularly at Schroders, I would work with leadership teams on setting up their teams for success. And when I would be in interviews with each of the team members, and they might be sharing frustrations or challenges, it all often came down to the way they were working together as a team, not the work that they were doing. And so often it was all too easy to then go, okay, how much time have you spent together as a team? Have you actually, even if it's doing things that are social, that are non-work related, like how much do you actually know about each other? Have you even had a conversation about, are you a team or are you just a group of people that come together for a meeting every quarter? Have you had those conversations? And often by just creating a safe space for them to have those conversations, I honestly just see that in the room. And then when they go into strategy conversations or roadmap or planning conversations, the dynamic has shifted quite significantly.
It's really interesting because the work that we've done over the last couple of years has really changed because of the kind of the COVID, I suppose, hangover in relation to teams. The fact that people before COVID tended to work in the same place, there was much. I don't think it was any better or any worse, but it feels as if there's been tangibly with the remoteness, the hybrid, that actually that connection has worsened. I mean, that's terrible English, but it's definitely got worse and harder for people to connect. And so most of the team days that we've been done, the core of it has been about trust and about communication, which probably 4 years ago would have been a nice to have. And it would have all have been about strategy and all have been about, purpose. It's all about actually how people get together because they just don't have the rhythms and the rituals to do that anymore.
Yeah. And just to sort of be slightly controversial, like I am a big believer in in-person connection, don't get me wrong. But I have also seen high performing teams have all of those amazing ingredients and work really successfully in a hybrid way. So I do not succumb to this kind of wave that you have to be physically together in a room for 3 days a week to create high performance. And interestingly, in my new organization, I am 3 days in. Their legendary status on the Great Places to Work, and I'm super curious to work out why, all working hybridly, that I can just feel the level of trust and connectedness as I walk in the door. It is so obvious, and they are all working in a very hybrid, flexible way and all high performing and achieving results.
I 100% agree with you. I think it's got nothing to do with that. I think it's got to do with, and we're going to unpack it huge amount, but I think it's been one of those, it's like a symptom rather than the cause. And you can't blame one thing on it. That's brilliant. Thank you. Wonderful. Brad, can I throw to you? Because let's face it, the world of work is changing. We're in that kind of real, I would say, learning zone in terms of AI. Everyone's talking about AI in terms of systems and processes, and it's going to get rid of all people's jobs and everything like that. But actually, I'm not a big subscriber of that, and really it's about the humanity. But I'm really fascinated to understand your viewpoint on this because you're working with teams and leaders in this space about how AI is transforming that individual performance and how that impacts and how we kind of have to upgrade the team as a result of, technology, new ways of working.
What a wonderful question. And thank you very much for this question. It's one that I sit with day and night. Too many hours of the day I'll spend on this. So just a couple of facts to set some context. In the UK, it's been quantified that a meeting, as the most regular place where people get together in a team, costs the productivity of the UK £50 billion a year from unproductive meetings. And that's just in the UK, right? Added on to that, we are having twice as many meetings as we did since 2020. So now we're getting together more, and it's costing us more in lost productivity when we do get together. So this is then quite interesting because now AI has come along recently in the last couple of years for those of us who've just started working with it. And it's made us all individually better, all individually smarter. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I'm a big user of AI and I love it. And I've gone down a road where actually I've drifted away from what I started asking about and got lost. And that's a dangerous place to get into. So you come back. But then what I found is we still have to get together in a team to have a conversation to align. And that was quite interesting for me, because then what I discovered was if you have a bad meeting, an emotionally distraught meeting, it could be very deep or not very deep, it stays with you for hours afterwards. And so all of a sudden, this place, this original human technology, the meeting, becomes a really powerful place for people to be able to do good work together. And the question then becomes, okay, so will AI disrupt us meet better, in meeting better, or will it help us meet better? And there's three things that I've held on to that I think are really important when working at across an organization at what is a high-performing team. And very simply the first one is the team clear on what its purpose is? Does it know why it exists in the organization? But interestingly, also, is it clear on what its purpose is right now? Because we need to adapt as a team to changing contexts. So you can't keep still, but being clear as a team, what is the organization requiring of us right now? I think that's important. Then the second thing is, what is the work that we need to do to be able to deliver on that purpose? The task, if you like. And the purpose and the task, I think, is the space where AI is traditionally going. Hundreds of billions are being spent on helping us do our tasks more effectively, whether it's through AI transcribing or any ream of other calendar efficiencies, whatever it is, they're all task orientated.
Yeah.
But the third aspect is the human dynamics. And that's the one actually where all the magic is, because if you get that right, then the task can be completed much more efficiently if you've got those human dynamics working well for the team.
That's just really interesting. What would you say are those human dynamics?
The way I've tried to codify it in the work that I've been doing with AI is break it down to 3 dimensions. So the first aspect is what are we consciously aware of how we're working as a team? And that's the kind of stuff that you might do team charters about, or you might visibly see from each other. And that's good, right? Because then at least you're starting to have the conversation of how we want to work together to do the work we need to do.
Yep.
If I go to the extreme of that, you're into the realm of unconscious behaviors. So the sort of psychodynamic stuff that we do that we don't even know that we're doing, that we're playing out, that we're not even aware of. And then the middle gap is what's emerging, what's just under the table that's trying to get out for the team, and we haven't quite named yet. And I think if the team can create the psychological safety and the presence, and this is where the role of the leader is really important, to create that presence of noticing what's actually happening right now, what's going on for each of us. Because when a team can have that sort of conversation, then it can be more present to what it needs to do next and sense make what's actually happening to deliver the task, to deliver on it, what it's expected of it.
Can I come ask both? I'll come to Richard in a minute, but can I ask Jan and Brad? So everybody talks about psychological safety, and it just becomes, I don't know, we were on a pitch the other day and they were saying, how's this going to increase psychological safety? We want people to try. And I was sort of a little bit, is this just a buzzword? I mean, I don't necessarily believe it's a buzzword, so I'm not being provocative for provocative's sake, but we love an anachronism. We love a buzzword in HR. And it feels like psychological safety at the moment is it. Do is it? How important is it? What are we actually saying, and what do we do about it at the end of the day? Because it feels like we're sort of on a merry-go-round that we can't get off, and everybody wants to solve it, a bit like culture was a couple of years ago. Is it not? Love your thoughts.
So I do think it's an overused phrase at the moment. I think everyone's sort of got on the bandwagon. I don't believe it's a sort of a buzzword or a kind of a trend, because actually, when I spend time looking at why teams aren't working or why there's an issue, it's often because there's a lack of psychological safety in some way. And then so I think sometimes people are bandying the word around a bit too much, without really kind of necessarily truly connecting with the concept of it. But I think if you have a team that don't have a space where they can ask the questions they need to ask, they can put their hand up with a different idea to the norm. If those things don't exist, then you don't get innovation, you don't get creativity, you don't get otherwise, and I can just see teams repeating the same things they've always done. And it just takes that brave person to go, actually, I wonder if we thought about this slightly differently, and it can just change the dynamic. But none of that exists if psychological safety isn't there. And I just think about some of the teams that I've been in and where I think the energy starts to disappear. It's because a leader can be the one thing that can quash psychological safety very quickly in the way that they behave and make people feel. And so I have felt that myself.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Brad.
Yeah, I mean, Jan, I agree with everything you've said, so I won't cover the ground that you've already spoken through. One of the conversations we had before we came on today was, what's really on people's minds right now, because the world's moving so fast. And I suppose 3 practical things to maybe think about around psychological safety, it doesn't matter what you call it, but it has to be there, is number 1, do you notice as a leader that people feel that they're able to speak up? Do you get that sense that people are contributing to the group conversation? Secondly, what is the group's appetite to work with difference? Is it homogenized, trying to kind of all find a sense of oneness and belonging, because it doesn't feel like people want to stretch out to embrace difference? And thirdly, if you can embrace difference and you can speak up, then you're into the realm of being able to work with conflict, because conflict is where the magic happens. But you've got to feel safe enough to be able to be in conflict with each other because you have difference of opinions. Of course we do, we all do, but you've got to be safe enough to be able to do that. So if you can get those 3 things into place, and you can notice them in the team that you're working with or the teams that you're leading, I think it gives you a good sense of the practical levers that you've got at your disposal to create the right sort of environment for people to perform at their best.
Brilliant. I'm seeing we're getting some questions coming in, so I'm going to hold on those questions, and I'm going to go to Richard, and then I'm going to start firing questions at you guys. So get ready in a couple of minutes. Richard, can I come to you last but no means least? So the question I kind of wanted to ask you was, when we think about teams, sometimes, again, a bit of a buzzword, we talk about silos. So from silos to systems, what is the organizational uplift of team excellence? What would you say to that?
Well, before I start, I just want to prove this is in fact live television on account of the fact that my camera seems to have died mid-performance. But in the true class act, I'll try and carry on regardless. So apologies, everyone. For some, it might be a blessing that you can't see my cheery face. Before we get there, though, I've answered the question directly. I'm a great believer, as you know, in terms of personal development and finding little tips. And my first tip for the team this morning is have a listen to the Economist's Boss Class podcast series, where they package up some of the things that we've been talking about already. And I was struck by the Levi Strauss, the Gene Makers chief executive, Michelle Gass, who captured the role of the CEO beautifully when she said that her role was to constantly push the company to reach its next peak. And I empathize with that. I really feel that it's my job to define the peak. And most importantly, as Jan was saying, to be the coach that builds the team that has all of the capabilities to get to the summit. And I think we've all been in organizations where when it's going well, the impact is profound. You feel it as a team player as well as a leader. And I think high performing teams don't just deliver They actually multiply each other's impact. They're engines of innovation. They help organizations spot opportunities that competitors are missing. They raise the bar for colleagues for trust, as we've just been talking about, and they improve the ability to execute across all of the functions, not just, one specific area, and helps embed the culture. And maybe that's what we're getting to in answering this question, the culture where there is individual accountability, but also creativity coexists at the same time, and it creates a virtuous cycle, attracting better talents, reinforcing trust with customers, and ultimately delivering better commercial outcome for shareholders. And you asked right up at the front of the show to when we work together. I always think of the Talk fiber deployment that we worked on, and the role there was to build a task force with all of the functional experts right across everything to roll out a new set of telecoms infrastructure, never been done before, into York. And everyone in that team had this summit, this peak in mind, and the sum of the parts really helped to drive a very positive culture, a system, if you like, where everyone was adding to the excellence. The sum of the parts were greater as a result of that culture.
And I think you're right. I mean, they always say there's no I in team, but there has to be a leader, right? And we talked about it, who has to set the agenda, and whether that's the purpose, the mission, and the audacious goals. And that certainly was the case when we worked together at Talk. The Wheel of Fortune that was only supposed to have 12 priorities and had about 41. But less said about that, the better. But at the end of the day, we kind of all knew what we were working towards. And I think sometimes that can get forgotten when we're working harder and we're working faster. And sometimes I always say to leaders, it's about slowing down to speed up. Because I think if you can slow down and you can go back to the purpose of why you're all there, and you give people very clear goals that are stretching, and then they've got development to do, then you're in a way you're working collectively to deliver that. But everyone's got skin in the game. Would you say that's
I'm not sure I would agree with slow down. I'd prefer to modify that to have time to communicate. One of the great challenges is for everyone to understand what precisely the goal is, or as Michelle said, which is the summit that we want to go to. And individuals, we've all got our own priorities. We've all got our to-do list that extends to those 42 points. It's understanding and deciding exactly which of those priorities is the company's priority. And at times that's a hard conversation, because a subject matter expert realizes that there's something in their department or their area of expertise that really needs fixing, but that might not be the company's priority. The organization's priority may well be focused on revenue or profit, or something that whilst that's an important element, it may in itself not ultimately be the very key investment priority in a world where resources is tight, but time is often even tighter.
That's really interesting, because we were talking to a team the other day, and they were doing a 360 project on the senior leadership team to look at how they can work more collectively, better together. And one of the things that's come out is about communication. There's too much communication, not necessarily the right type of communication, and everyone's running around a bit like headless chickens. So I'd really love to hear from the three of you. I don't think there's a magic bullet, and I'm probably asking you a question you can't answer, but I'm going to try, which is, communication is critical. I always talk about it, coming from a background in TV, is communication, but you can overdo it, but you can also undercook it as well. is there a right level of communication? Or how do you see it when people do get it right, and when do you see it when people get it wrong?
I was, if you don't mind jumping in, I was so eager to press the unmute button when Jan was talking about hybrid working. I think it's about effective communication. And when you're all together, there is, what the way in which things are said and the body language you receive and transmit helps you to understand and tailor your communication in that moment to be a little bit more effective. And I think that's the benefit of being back in an office, is that it should be easier. Not saying that it's not possible to do that online. Here we are trying to do it online today, but I think it's just easier to be effective in your communication if you're getting those non-verbal cues.
Jan?
Yeah,
after that.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think often, when I note, going back to the conversation about effective meetings, like it's often the way people are just connecting at a human level. These are people who, connect, they chat, they know each other's lives, and then they get straight into the work and it gets done. And I think it's having had some of that in-person time to kind of build that bank of trust. But I don't think over communication is a thing, if I'm honest. I think I don't know, I just sort of think if people haven't heard the message that you want to say, or they're not feeling the way that you want to feel, then there's then you need to communicate again in a different, but probably in a different way, like just fire hose.
I mean, we've all got lots and lots of emails in our inbox, and at times you just feel that we're overwhelmed with email communication, and if someone were to send another one, there is a chance that it'll get missed. And that's what I think I try and focus on, is effective communication rather than volume of communication. Maybe that's what you were referring to.
I think you're right. Brad, do you want to add anything before there's some questions coming in, so I'm really keen to not leave them hanging. Go on.
Two practical things, both actually lifting off what Jan was saying. First one, just every time you go into a team meeting and you start a team meeting, the 3 words of connection before content, I've always found helpful. So to connect at a human level before you get into the content, and it doesn't need to be long, but those 3 words are very, very helpful. The second thing, and this is just, I find always very helpful, if you think about working in a team dynamic, I know that the relationship I have with my wife, that beautiful relationship, it's really challenging to stay on the same page. We can go and do different things for half an hour, come back and we see the world differently. We have to work at that relationship. Now, if there's 3 people, you're triad of a group, well, then there's multiple relationships there. One, A with B, A with C, C with B, and so it goes on. The more people you have in a team, up to say 10, you've got potentially 64 plus types of relationships all at play in that one room. So to Jan's point, I don't think you can't not communicate. You can't not keep on communicating, because it's so hard to stay on the same page. But it's noticing, how do you create the right container and focus the conversation to give all the voices a chance to be able to say what they want to say, express their differences, and be able to be in conflict with each other. And if you can do that, then you start working with effective communication at a team level.
Brilliant. And people are agreeing. Remy's just said, excellent point. It takes commitment and work. And I think that's the moral of the story here. Teams don't just happen. They don't magically go through the model from forming, storming, norming, and performing. It takes work from everybody. And the biggest takeaway that I have of leading my team is that at the end of the day, if you don't communicate, if you don't show up, if you don't are prepared to be vulnerable, and you don't allow and trust people to be themselves, then ultimately it's a collective rather than a team. And there's a massive difference. And we've all worked in those where people are just individually focused. In some contexts, that's fine. But if you're really talking about high performance, it's everybody working together in whatever that may look like. So let's throw to some questions, because we've got about 10 minutes, sort of 8 minutes to go. So Jan, I'm going to start with you, because there's one particularly that came up. So if psychological safety is essential for high performing teams, but there's a leadership disconnect where leaders can talk the talk but don't model the behaviors, can HR really drive that change? And if so, how can HR challenge cultural blockers at the top without losing credibility or influence?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the reality is, in my experience, it is super hard, because, like I said before, a leader can shift the dynamics around psychological safety quite quickly. I think as HR, I think we're always continually on the journey of creating that space where we're a strategic business partner, that we are in a sense a coach to that leader. And that would be, I would really take time to build my credibility as a thought partner, as a coach to that leader, so that I feel that I've then created an environment where, perhaps I can say to that leader, give them some feedback, say, I don't know if you're aware, but when this is happening, it's having this impact on the team. Perhaps a different way we could, I can see your intent, because sometimes, the intent could be really good. It's just been executed in a really, so again, I always think about things, give everyone, be generous of how people are performing. Don't assume that's ill intent. It's just perhaps just not being done very well. So then, find that space where you can, without them feeling awful, how could you approach that differently? Or I don't know if you can, this is what I can see. And that's how I would keep my credibility, but try and influence from the sidelines. But it is hard. It's not easy. That can be quite challenging.
One of the things that I think we can all benefit from is having a common language. And I don't literally mean that in terms of, where our teams are based. I mean, in terms of being able to discuss the psychological safety. And recently I went to a workshop that was very handy in talking about the different steps of psychological safety. And that allowed us all to leave the room and have a discussion about how do we feel in different meetings and different settings.
Brilliant.
And because we had the same lexicon, it made the communication much more effective.
Yeah. I think that's really good. Richard, can I throw to you? In your experience, what would be 1 or 2 team routines that have helped you to create high performing culture in your team?
I think it goes back to the communications again. One, having an appropriate forum to communicate, and I mean tell people what your expectation is, but equally importantly, listen to the feedback and concerns. And sometimes that takes place, that's best in a meeting room, or we talked about the benefits of online, but having the opportunity for two-way conversation and stage managing it such that it is truly two-way. And then the second thing is a bit related to the first, and I think Jan mentioned it in the chat, is having alternative forums where people can have a conversation and give their feedback in an environment that's perhaps a bit less threatening than in front of a large audience in a meeting room. And that could be something as simple as a glass of wine or a beer or whatever after work, or it could be a lunch, or it could be a coffee, a more informal setting, and trying to get the balance between those two environments so that you're truly giving and receiving effective communication, I think is probably the top tip.
Brilliant, thank you. Brad, will AI create a divide between teams of those who know how to use and those who do not, especially with generational gaps?
Karen, thanks for that question. It's a good one. It's had me pondering it a lot. So a couple of normalizing things for all of us, I think. First one is no one knows where AI is going. Even those at the helms of the AI companies, they don't know. No one knows. So we're all in this boat together is the first thing. The second thing is, I think that, if you imagined a working world without Google, and somebody starts working with Google, how much more individually productive they would be. So it makes the individual better, but the individual's still got to work as a team. So I think there's probably a reality that those who do use AI will go faster, will seem smarter. Whether or not it sticks in their brain, there's the recent MIT research that says that people that use AI first before actually engaging with the idea themselves first remember what they've done less. So we don't know what the counterculture results of using AI are yet. But it still remains that when you get together as a team, that relational aspect, that communication, that team dynamic is where it's at. We've still got to pay attention to that, no matter how individually smart we are. Whether you're a Generation X and you're using AI as a form of enhanced Google, or whether you're Generation Y that's actually building your life and understanding who you are and your identity through AI. It's happening already, but we've still got to get together in a room and we've still got to work it out together.
Even if that's just to test the mirages that are occasionally created with AI, the fact checking is so important.
And I think you're right. We went to the CIPD Future of Work, and there was, I think most of the talks were about technology, and most of them were AI. And there was a real divide in the HR community about those that had adopted. So they gave a case study of McDonald's who'd used it for their Speak Up program, and how it actually had helped generationally get people to speak up around some of the, trickier things like, racism going on in some of the, franchises, or, simple things like I haven't got the right uniform. And it had really given them so much data. But what was lacking was people actually then doing anything with it and looking at the trends and thinking about it. So I think it's a bit like when all of the oracles and workdays and all of those things, were flooded in the market. It still needs a human to interpret and to look and think about what are the potential consequences of that, and work with the leadership team to unpack that. And that, for me, was lacking when we went to the CIPD Future of Work, because it was much more about buy this tool, use it's going to save world peace. Actually, no, humans are still humans, and people work for people. People still leave organizations and bad managers, not a chatbot. And I might sound really old, but I still think that that's the case, and hopefully in my nephew's lifetime that will still be the case, who started his work experience this week, which was enlightening beyond enlightening. But anyway, I could spend a whole webinar on that. So I'm going to have to draw us to a close, because we've only got 3 minutes. And Jane, I know that Jan's just answered your question, so I'm sorry not to be able to throw. But Tanya, you make a good point. I think also very critical to upskill leaders and provide them with the tools and support to foster high performance. I totally 100% agree with you, and I couldn't have put it better. So thank you so much, and thank you to our brilliant panel. I hope you've got as much out of this as I have.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. So listen, we can continue the conversation offline. You can connect with our panelists. They're on LinkedIn, and these slides will be sent round. But if you're looking for some tools, these are the LTT favorite tools for HR teams to help individuals, teams, and organizations drive high performance. There's some real great ones in there, like Lego Series Play. There is Voice Print. There is some oldies and goodies like 16 personalities, strengths. So have a download. It's completely free. It may give you some ideas when you're going into meetings with your leaders and your team. So please plug away and use to your heart's content. Those of you that are interested particularly in coaching, so whether you've had a coach, whether you are thinking about driving a coaching culture within your organization, and whether you've got leaders that you want to be better at coaching. Myself and Craig, he's not on, poor Craig's been missed out. But Craig and I, well, I say he's my aunt to my deck. I don't know whether that's him any or Laurel Hardy, but
which is which, Joe?
I know, it's a big script. Exactly. We will be doing a double act around coaching that counts, the strategic value of leadership coaching. So if you want to join us and hear our views and pose us some questions in a couple of weeks, again, it's a free webinar. You can click and join us. And then look, if you've got a nutty problem, you know, some of the things that we've talked about today that you think, oh, you know, they seem to know what they're doing. Come and have a chat with us. There's no obligation. It's not about sales. It's not about, you know, trying to get something. But if you really want to just have a chat, the names in our company, you know, we're Let's Talk Talent. We like to chat. So please come and have a chat with us. You're very welcome. But there's no obligation if you choose to. So we're at 10. I've actually hit 10 o'clock. I've hit it on the nose. And everyone would have thought I'd worked in television before or even worked on a live program. So I'm putting my skills to good use. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I hope you have a fabulous day. And thank you, Richard, Jan, and Brad, for being superstars as I knew you would be. Good luck, Jan, with your new role. We look forward to
Thank you.
Bye. Rich, I'll see you in hopefully in a couple of weeks. Brad, we'll be in touch super soon. Have a great day, everybody, and thank you again.
Thanks,
Thank
Joe.
you.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.